for 5 minutes.
Start off with some medicine. Okay, so first we have autism, which I know you guys know what that is. It was discovered in 1943 by Hans Asperger, an Australian pediatrician. Autism is a disorder used to describe people with like unusual behavior and social problems. And he, over his lifetime, he analyzed many people, like many children, to see like how they're different from other children. And he noticed that some of them had a pattern of unusual behavior and abilities that he called autistic psychopathy, and meaning self-personality disease. And children could be diagnosed with this as young as 2 years old. And I have some pictures. There's Hans on the left, and then there's him with a young child, and then him at a table with another child.
Right, so, streptomycin. Prior to the discovery of streptomycin, I believe that's what it's pronounced as. Streptomycin. Prior to this, in the mid-1940s, or the early 1940s, Selman A. Waxman, who is photographed here with Albert Schatz in a Rutgers laboratory working on streptomycin. Prior to this, he had discovered actinomycin, which failed utterly because it was too toxic to be used on any human specimen. But this drug was very important in the 1940s because it was able to combat a wide variety of pathogenic bacteria that penicillin could not. Primarily, the primary one that it could fight was tuberculosis. So it greatly helped to eradicate the public health concern of tuberculosis. And also, sulfa drugs, otherwise known as sulfanilamide, was developed in the early or late 1930s, I believe, in Europe. Gerard Domach, I believe, was the German who had figured out that Prontosil, which is a dye, actually protected mice from infection, and scientists in Paris had then isolated the key component in Prontosil, which is sulfanilamide. And then American scientists in the beginning of the war in the early 1940s had developed various other versions of the drug, which included sulfapyridine, sulfathiazole, and sulfadiazine, I believe. And each of these was more potent than the first and were implemented into first aid kits in the military in little powder tablets, which were applied to open wounds to prevent bacterial infection. And it was the first antimicrobial drug. But eventually, as penicillin had further developed, sulfanilamide took a backseat as penicillin became the more effective antibacterial drug.
Penicillin was discovered earlier, but it was not until 1939 that Howard Florey and some of his colleagues at Oxford discovered its antibacterial properties. In 1941, they came to the Peoria lab, Howard Florey and three of his colleagues, to research penicillin, and they found the best strain from a moldy cantaloupe in Peoria. In 1943, the required clinical trials were held, and it was discovered that it was the most effective antibacterial agent that they had found up to that point. Production greatly increased, and it was even used to treat soldiers on D-Day. Throughout the 40s, the price dropped significantly. In 1940, one dose of penicillin was nearly priceless. In 1943, it was $20 for one dose, and in 1946, it was 55 cents for one dose. Two of the British scientists received Nobel Prize for their work. Andrew J. Moyer from the U.S. Is in the Inventors Hall of Fame, and he received the patent in 1948 for the mass production of penicillin. And the British lab and the Peoria lab are both now National Historic Chemical Landmarks. And then Staphylococcus aureus, this is a more modern picture, was the first bacteria to resist penicillin.
In 1945, the first temporary kidney transplant and first successful kidney dialysis occurred. And the first successful kidney transplant was human-to-human, because before they were doing animal-to-human and animal-to-animal transplants. And this took place at Peter Benton Brigham Hospital in Boston on a woman with renal failure. This helped push scientists to find kidneys that were compatible with the person needing one. And then also in 1945, Dr. Kolff, that's his picture up on the board, in Nazi Holland, using common parts he found off cars and washing machines, built a dialysis machine from 1943 to 1945.
The electrocardiograph was a machine invented in 1946 that allowed the observation of the rhythm of the heart. It could help diagnose any disease. It replaced the galvanometer. It was invented in 1911. It required a person to be submerged in salt water to work, and it wasn't anywhere near as accurate as the electrocardiograph or ECG or EKG, where it used 12 sticky electrodes that were attached all over the body. It printed out a sheet in a graph that would show the heart rhythm, and a doctor could point out any abnormalities and diagnose heart disease.
RH was discovered in 1940 by two scientists, and RH, or rhesus factor, is a protein substance present in the red blood cells of most people, and this creates an antigenic reaction, or antibodies. And they found this by taking rhesus monkey blood and putting it in rabbit's blood, where they found the reaction to occur. And a person can be either RH positive or RH negative, and this has no bearing on your health or life, but you cannot mix the two types together. A problem with this is for expecting mothers. So if a mom is RH positive and her baby is RH negative, or the other way around, the pregnancy could end in a miscarriage, a stillbirth, or the baby could be born with anemia, jaundice, or other serious medical problems. And it wouldn't be until decades later where they found a medicine to help with this problem.
Alright, the GI Bill of Rights. People were worried about when the soldiers were coming home if there would be an economic slowdown because of all the soldiers and there'd be less demand for all the war materials. So FDR signed the bill into law June 22nd, 1944, and provided 6 benefits. It gave soldiers education and training. It guaranteed loans for homes, farms, and business. It gave unemployment compensation for up to a year. It helped the soldiers find jobs. It prioritized building materials for Veterans Administration hospitals, and there was a military review of all dishonorable discharges.
Mendez versus Westminster and the California Board of Education was a court case in 1946. A girl by the name of Sylvia Mendez, who is pictured at the left, and her brothers and sisters tried to go to Main Street School, which is in Orange County, California. The school is actually about 15 minutes from where I used to live in California, and I've been inside the school and whatnot. But it was similar to the Plessy versus Ferguson case. Sylvia and her sister and brother tried to go into Main Street School, which was an all-white school at the time, and they were not allowed in. The white community was saying that, okay, the Hispanics are dirty and unclean, and they don't speak good English, and they shouldn't be educated. So they had separate schools, much like the blacks did, and also like the black schools, they were run down and separate but equal, quote unquote. I actually found a link of NPR News. They interviewed Sylvia Mendez in her 60s, and she just kind of talked briefly about what her experience was and how she
From NPR News, this is All Things Considered. I'm Michelle Norris.
When she and her 2 younger brothers tried to enroll in the white school, but were turned away and sent to the school for Mexicans, Hoover Elementary.
And you saw a picture of the Hoover School that was like a shack with dirt around it and no playground. And the school books would come from the white school, whatever was left over, given to the Mexican school.
Mendez says her father was outraged. He talked to his neighbors about suing the school district. Mexican-American parents wanted no part of it.
They were so happy in that barrio. The Hoover School was right in the middle of the barrio. and all they had to do was walk